If you still believe that trading your entire life can earn you the American dream, then take a closer look at the 8 million lives in New York City, where everything someone owns after a lifetime of labor might only be enough to claim a corner of sidewalk and a torn sleeping bag. This is not just a story of homelessness. It's a story of a divide, a quiet but growing fracture between those who still believe in the promise of this city and those who are no longer even recognized by it. Behind the glow of sunset, the city once called the heart of the world now reveals its shadows. The neon lights that once symbolized prosperity no longer shine for the forgotten souls beneath them. What you're about to see is not a headline. It's not entertainment. It's the daily reality of families, children, veterans, workers, people who once believed but were left behind. Welcome to New York's dark divide, from dreams to despair. As of April 2025, more than 108,000 people are sleeping overnight in New York City's shelters. But that's just the surface. Thousands of others, uncounted and unseen, are sheltering under awnings, inside old cars, on the floors of subway stations, or in the dim corners behind buildings no one remembers. They live between the lines of the system, in places with no names, no numbers, no zip codes, and because they are not counted, they are not helped. Conservative estimates suggest over 350,000 people in New York are now living without stable housing. It's a cold figure, but behind it are lives unraveling in silence. They are the American dreams once built on labor, hope, and discipline, now curled up in sleeping bags beneath scaffolding. They are former delivery drivers, security guards, caregivers, line cooks. The people who once kept the city alive, now barely surviving in its blind spots. You might think this mostly happens to someone else, but many of them once lived lives not so different from your own. They paid rent, they raised kids, they filed taxes, and then one medical bill, one missed paycheck, one rent hike, and the bottom dropped out. That's the terrifying part. Not that homelessness exists, but that it can happen even when you do everything right. In New York, losing your home doesn't just mean sleeping on concrete. It means slipping out of the system. Without an address, you lose your documents. Without documents, you can't apply for aid. Without aid, you disappear. And once you're no longer in a database, the city no longer sees you. Not as a citizen, not as a neighbor, not even as a person in need. You become invisible. And in a city that moves this fast, invisibility is the quietest form of erasure. You might think that this crisis mostly affects people who live alone, those who've strayed from the structure of society. But the truth is far more severe and far closer than most are willing to admit. Today, nearly 70% of the people in New York's shelter system are families, and among them are over 37,000 children. That means that every night, in the same city that lights up Times Square, tens of thousands of children are falling asleep in places not meant for sleep, not meant for childhood. Some have changed schools 3 times in one academic year, moving between shelters, motels, and borrowed spaces. But none of those places are a home. Many of these families came to New York with the hope of a new beginning. They worked as janitors, cab drivers, home aides, restaurant workers. They played by the rules, clocked in, paid taxes, raised their children. But their incomes couldn't keep up with rising rent. And when rent wins, even families lose. In New York, a full-time job no longer guarantees a roof. Not when the median monthly rent for a one-bedroom is over $4,600. Not when landlords demand credit scores, deposits, guarantors. In a market where simply having a paycheck isn't enough to be seen as worthy of shelter. And so these families, mothers, fathers, children, now live under the silent weight of temporary roofs and permanent uncertainty. Each night they wait in line for a bed. Each morning they wake up and try to act like everything is normal. For their kids, for their dignity, for the world that looks away. But how long can a child carry on like that before they stop believing they deserve more? These children grow up surrounded not by dreams, but by a quiet lesson. That even if your parents worked hard, stayed honest, followed every rule, there are systems that will still leave you behind. And if a city like New York can't make space for the families who once held it together, then what exactly are we building? and who is it really for? There are places in New York where the decline is no longer hidden. It doesn't wait for darkness. It unfolds in broad daylight, in front of store windows, school buses, and families just trying to get by. One of those places is Roosevelt Avenue, running through Jackson Heights, once one of the most vibrant cultural and commercial arteries in Queens. Today it is a stretch of growing tension, where residents walk faster and look over their shoulders, not because they're paranoid, but because they've learned to be. A reader described it plainly. This feels more like a red light district in Bangkok than the neighborhood I grew up in. From the 70th to the 100th Street, the signs of decay are no longer subtle. Unlicensed shops, often disguised as massage parlors or salons, operate freely. Women solicit openly. Groups gather at corners where enforcement has faded. And for the people living there, the feeling isn't just fear, it's abandonment. But the impact goes beyond public safety. When local governance breaks down, children learn to grow up in chaos. 14-year-old Jalen Luego walks through Roosevelt every morning to get to school. And every morning she passes scenes that no child should have to normalize. She says it best. Walking to school makes me feel like I'm losing my innocence. Her mother, who has lived in the area for over 3 decades, says she's never had to walk her daughter to school with so much anxiety. This isn't just urban decline, it's environmental trauma. Sustained daily exposure to instability, unpredictability, and fear. Psychologists warn, when young people are constantly exposed to lawlessness and neglect, they learn that disorder is normal and that help is optional. The lesson is subtle but devastating, and families aren't the only ones affected. Local businesses, many of them family-owned, passed down through generations, are struggling to survive. A restaurant near 74th Street reported losing nearly half its revenue in 1 year. Some shops are looted. Others are wrongly associated with illegal activity simply because of their location. The NYPD launched a major raid in January 2025 to crack down on illicit operations. But as many residents report, the problem returned just days later. The names changed, the addresses changed. The nature of the activity didn't. This is what happens when enforcement becomes symbolic, a photo op, not a solution. Community leaders like Hiram Monserrati have proposed tangible reforms. Increase patrol presence by 50 officers for precincts 110 and 115. Place Roosevelt Avenue under unified 24/7 supervision. Coordinate across city agencies for sustained oversight. But so far, the response remains on paper, while life on Roosevelt continues as usual. And that's the most sobering part. This isn't a crisis moment. This is the new normal. If a street once filled with music, family-owned shops, and generational pride can decay this quietly, what does it teach the children who grow up there? What does it say to the families who stayed? And how long can we call it a neighborhood if no one feels safe to walk down the block? In today's New York, the word invasion is no longer confined to history books or war films. It's happening quietly and visibly, on sidewalks, under bridges, and beside highways. But this invasion has no explosions, no uniforms, only tents made of tarps, plastic sheets, and wooden pallets, held together by hope and necessity. Across the city, tent cities have sprung up from the Bronx and East Harlem to the base of the Williamsburg Bridge. They stretch along fences and underpasses like a crack running through the city's foundation, and no one declared war. They're not there because they want to be. They're there because they have nowhere else to go. Some were once Uber drivers who lost their cars when they couldn't keep up with rental payments. Others are retired nurses whose fixed incomes no longer cover utilities. There are students, workers, single parents, people who once had keys, addresses, routines. But their commonality isn't in the past, it's in the present. They no longer exist in the system. A man living near 125th Street said he worked for the Postal Service for nearly 20 years. But after a back surgery and a few months without income, he lost everything. He was turned away from a shelter for lacking insurance paperwork. Now he sleeps in a tent beside the tracks, his bed shaking each time a train passes. According to the Department of Homeless Services, nearly 4,100 people are now living directly outdoors in NYC. not counting the tens of thousands more in cars, warehouses, or temporary spaces. These places have no address, no mailbox, and therefore, no voice. No data means no responsibility. And nearby residents, they feel the pressure too. Garbage, noise, uncertainty. But few dare say what they feel most, that this isn't just an encroachment of the homeless, it's the retreat of the system that was supposed to protect them all. To live without an address in New York is not just to lack a place to sleep. It's to slowly vanish from the mechanisms that define legal existence. Without an address, you don't receive mail. Without mail, you lose access to official documents. No ID means no job applications, no leases, no access to public services. You cannot vote. You cannot open a bank account. You cannot prove who you are to a system that only responds to records. Most government aid programs are built on one foundational assumption, that you exist somewhere, permanently. But when your location changes nightly, from shelters to cars to borrowed porches, the system stops knowing where to find you and soon stops trying. You are not on any list, so no one is assigned to help. A man who once held a stable job with union benefits can lose everything after a few missed paychecks or a medical emergency. Once evicted, he loses his mailing address. Once that happens, the decline isn't just financial. It becomes bureaucratic. His health insurance lapses. He misses paperwork deadlines. He falls out of eligibility. One closed door leads to 3 more. This is how people fall through the cracks, not all at once, but in steps so quiet the city barely hears them. And because they're not counted, they're not questioned, not seen, not served. The most dangerous kind of exclusion isn't loud. It's silent, procedural, and almost invisible. And in a city where everything is tracked, from rental prices to traffic patterns, how is it that the lives of so many can vanish so completely simply because they no longer have a number on a door? From the outside, New York's shelter system seems like a logical solution. Beds, meals, and a roof for tens of thousands each night. But inside, many describe it as chaotic, overcrowded, and dehumanizing. Hundreds sleep in communal spaces where privacy doesn't exist. Belongings go missing. Medications disappear. A woman in the Bronx lost all her documents within a week. "I felt like I was in prison," she said, but no one was responsible. Some shelters ban phones, prohibit filming, and conduct bag checks at every entry. Rigid rules replace compassion. Staff are overwhelmed. Security replaces support. What was meant to be protection starts to feel like control. That's why many choose the streets, not because it's safer, but because it's theirs. Because even in danger, some freedom remains. And if people would rather sleep outside than be helped inside, then maybe the problem isn't just homelessness. It's how we define help. New York is still building homes. In 2024 alone, more than 27,000 affordable units were added, the highest number in the city's history. On paper, it sounds like progress. But in practice, the people who need these homes the most rarely get in. From 2010 to 2023, housing supply grew just 9%, while the number of jobs rose 22%. Rents surged. The citywide vacancy rate has dropped to 1.4%, the lowest since 1968. In Manhattan, average rent now exceeds $4,600 per month, and in some neighborhoods, it's over $5,400. For working-class families earning less than $50,000 a year, even survival feels out of reach. Nearly half of all renters now spend more than 30% of their income on rent, a level considered unaffordable by national standards. And even when affordable housing is built, it isn't evenly distributed. Areas like the Bronx and East Brooklyn receive most of the new construction, while central neighborhoods, East Queens, the Upper West Side, see almost none. Programs like FEPS and the 1515 Supportive Housing Plan were meant to bridge the gap. But complex paperwork, strict eligibility rules, and years-long wait lists block access. Many applicants are disqualified for not having documents, for earning too little, or for not meeting long-term residency requirements. The result? Units exist, but remain unreachable. Not because people aren't trying, but because the system quietly says they don't qualify. In a city that claims to offer opportunity, what does it mean when even the homes marked affordable are out of reach for those who clean the buildings, serve the food, and keep the trains running? For hundreds of thousands living without stable housing in New York, a warm meal is no longer a certainty. It's a gift, a clean restroom, a place to wash hands, to charge a phone, or to sit without being told to move. These are no longer basic needs, but privileges. And beyond the physical discomfort lies something more painful, the quiet loss of identity. No address means no documents. No documents mean no job, no account, no voice. You are not just unhoused, you are unseen. In shelters, on sidewalks, and in subway stations, people are not simply surviving poverty. They are being punished for it. New York is still called the city that never sleeps. But for many, it's not insomnia, it's uncertainty. Not dreams, but fear. Not choice, but absence. None of us choose where we're born, but we can choose how we respond to those being left behind. If this story moved you, share it. If you've lived it, speak up. Because change doesn't start with policy, it starts with seeing. Thanks for watching.